During a 1977 NBA game, a fight broke out between several players at half court. Kermit Washington punched Rudy Tomjanovich in the midst of the scuffle, resulting in a 60-day suspension and a $10,000 fine. Washington received numerous amounts of hate mail filled with racially charged death threats from the incident. This live, unscripted moment in the middle of the decade gives us a brief glimpse into how audiences were impacted by the growing number of African Americans now regularly appearing on television. There's a set going strong, a lot of things going on. Black actors, writers, and directors innovated a new variety of television programs throughout the 70s that increased representation, flourishing in what is now referred to as the first golden age of black television. By looking at each year individually, we can see how the number of opportunities given African Americans gradually increased, and how they seized these opportunities to take back control of how they were portrayed in front of audiences across the nation. The success of Woodstock early in 1970 proved that audiences were willing to actively watch musical performances. Televised musical performances thrived through talk shows and specialty programs showcasing many black performers. The year also gave us the first African-American talk show host in The Flip Wilson Show. Other shows from the 60s continued their run in 1970, such as The Mod Squad, Room 222, and Julia. Children's programming also helped increase representation through shows like Sesame Street, Captain Kangaroo, Josie and the Pussycats, and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. The year also gave us the births of Shonda Rhimes, Queen Latifah, Mike Epps, Taraji P. Henson, and Malcolm Jamal Warner. While we do not see too much of an increase of black shows in 1971, two of the most important programs to come out of the decade premiere: Soul Train and All in the Family. Children's shows continued to innovate representation with series like The Jackson 5 and The Electric Company. Even advertisers started to become more open to representation in their commercials, such as this Coca-Cola commercial from 1971. The year also gave us the births of The Office's Craig Robinson, Regina King, Jada Pinkett Smith, Emmanuel Lewis, and Snoop Dogg, who, lest we forget, actually did have his own show on MTV2.
This is the bizzle, Snoopy Deagle Double Jizzle. Yeah, it's off the hizzle, for shizzle, for brizzle. This is the show we call Doggy Fizzle.
"1972 further advanced black sitcoms with shows like Sanford and Son and Temperatures Rising, and introduced the world to George Jefferson in an episode of All in the Family. It also launched a network that would grow to highlight some of the most important black TV series in years to come. As always, children's programming remained at the forefront of progress with animated features such as A Charlie Brown Thanksgiving and the debut of Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. Notable births include the ageless Gabrielle Union, Jill Scott, Wayne Brady, Maya Rudolph, and Reggie Watts.
Ming mong, bong picky song, bing chong bing bang, bang chicky chong pan in the pie in the hole, the pot in the pan and the putty in the pan, in and out lubrication.
1973 was an interesting year in that many of the black TV shows that premiered would not last beyond a single season, such as the Shaft TV series, Tenafly, a black version of MASH called Rollout, and a talk show hosted by James Earl Jones entitled Black Omnibus, focusing on interviews with African-American musicians, comedians, and performers. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the sole exception to this trend was Schoolhouse Rock, which included a number of integrated characters within its episodes. Notable births include Tempest Bledsoe, Omar Epps, and Dave Chappelle. The year that gave us Nixon's resignation also brought about some of the most beloved made-for-TV movies, such as The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman and Free to Be, You and Me, as well as TV series like That's My Mama and Good Times.
Why is my name Florida? Oh, Lord. Oh. Dynamite!
Notable births include Mahershala Ali, Lark Voorhees, Mekhi Phifer, Aaron McGruer, and Exhibit.
Well, we're moving on now to the side.
During the second half of the 70s, we start to see some of the more memorable black TV shows of the decade premiere, such as All in the Family spin-off The Jeffersons, and racially integrated shows such as Barney Miller and Welcome Back Kotter. We also start seeing a rise in the prominence of black athletes on television, with Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier's Thrilla in Manila breaking records for most watched pay-per-view event. We also see the debut of Saturday Night Live, which will go on to cast some of the most popular black actors throughout its run. Notable Brits include Mad TV's Aries Spears, Tracy Toms, and while not necessarily TV stars, Tiger Woods and Marion Jones would be among the most watched black athletes of all time. The bicentennial gave us the 1976 NBA Finals between the Boston Celtics and the Phoenix Suns. The triple overtime contest has been referred to as the greatest NBA game of all time, with Celtics point guard JoJo White being declared the series MVP. Other shows that premiered include Family Feud, which would have several black contestants and would go on to be hosted by Steve Harvey. We also see the debut of Serrata's Court and What's Happening. Gone with the Wind makes its broadcast television debut on NBC, becoming the highest-rated program ever aired on a single network, until a certain black miniseries based on a book by Alex Haley premieres the following year. Notable births include Rashida Jones, Darius McCrary and Jaleel White, Sterling K. Brown, and Chadwick Boseman. The year of Elvis's death and disco's rise kicked off with one of the most highly watched programs ever to hit television, the week-long release of the miniseries Roots. American Bandstand celebrated 25 years on the air with a number of black performers, and Sesame Street celebrated its 1000th episode. Frustrated with the success of J.J. Walker's character, Esther Roll leaves Good Times, and Janet Jackson joins the cast as Penny. We also see the debut of animated shows like I Am the Greatest, The Adventures of Muhammad Ali, and Space Sentinels. NBC gives Richard Pryor his own sketch comedy show, which would be canceled after just 4 episodes due to its crass humor that would prove to be greatly influential in years to come.
Which third exhausting week should come to an end today. Meanwhile, down here in Mississippi, we make the scene.
Notable births include Kerry Washington, Ludacris, who shares the same birthday as me, and attention seeker Kanye West.
George Bush doesn't care about black people. Please
Now the world don't move to the beat of just one drum.
1978 gives us what is probably the weakest year of black television during the 70s.
What you talking about, Willis?
Though it did give us Different Strokes and the nationwide launch of Showtime, a channel that would grow to include some of the most prominent black TV shows in modern times. Notable births include Countess Vaughn, Kenan Thompson and Kel Mitchell, Tia and Tamara Mowry, and one of the most watched basketball stars of all time. We close out the decade with the end of the show that gave us many classic spin-offs, as well as a sequel to Roots that focuses on Kunta Kinte's descendants. The Harlem Globetrotters get their own short-lived animated series, and Muhammad Ali gets his first dramatic starring role in Freedom Road. We also see the debut of Benson and the launch of Nickelodeon, which would later be home to many young black aspiring actors in the 1990s. Notable births include Aaliyah, Lil Rel Howery, Jordan Peele, Rosario Dawson, and Kevin Hart. The 1970s brought a number of innovations. By the end of the decade, more than half of American audiences had access to color television sets. The shift to color also brought about the dramatic increase of people of color being represented on TV. Television allowed black influence to spread beyond urban areas and into the homes of millions, impacting popular culture in a way that wasn't seen in previous decades. Many of these shows continue to poke at black stereotypes, and even provoke them in some instances, but with more representation both in front and behind the camera, black actors, writers, and directors were able to push the boundaries of what black people were allowed to do on television throughout the 70s. These contributions paved the way for many shows to come, influencing black and white audiences alike.
Well, we're moving on now to